Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I wanted to do something a little bit different for this video, something a little bit more raw, but at the same time polished, which is why I'm sort of in a sport coat. I wanted to present a sort of new side of me, an old but new side of me to the channel. Because I wanted to give you an update on some life changes that have occurred in my life. I shared that in February of 2025, I lost my job along with hundreds of thousands of others, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that, but in my company alone, I think about 5,000 people lost their jobs. Back in February, I started this transition, and while I could have made myself into a victim, I didn't do that. And you would have seen in some of the Lake Superior Circle Tour videos that I talk about transitions and how they begin with an ending, and then there's a neutral zone, and then there's the new beginning. And that neutral zone is a really meaningful space that if you lean into it, if you see uncertainty as an opportunity, you can really expand who you are and invest in who you are and become someone new. As long as you have that understanding that the uncertainty is there as a gift to give you something brand new in your life, and if you take advantage of that neutral zone, eventually you will make space for something new to come into your life. And you have to learn to die to your past to really step into the new, and that's something I think I'll talk about in a little bit. But just going back to the Lake Superior video, in the first one, I sort of ended the intro with, I thought that this overland trip was going to be something more than just a transition. And prior to going on that trip, I'm someone that journals a lot. I'm not a drawer. I'm not an artist, but I like to. I have these visualizations that I like to attempt to draw in my journal, and I do that from time to time. But for the most part, it's a lot of writing, and there is science behind writing and what it does to your brain, and I'll put some of that knowledge on screen here. I can't remember exactly what it triggers in your brain, but I know that there is something that it does to you that you can call it manifestation or whatever you want to call it, but it almost becomes an imprint into your life. And so many of your actions then begin to align with whatever it is you're writing down or whatever it is you're drawing. And when these things start to happen over and over again, when you start achieving or receiving the things that you're writing down and the things that you're drawing, when that starts to consistently happen and you can't really explain it to others in a meaningful way or test it, the evidence is in your life, right? So it's hard to then deny that these things are happening because you're experiencing them, and your experience is your truth. No matter if it's a different experience to others, it's your experience, and those experiences shape your life. And the reason why I wanted to do this video is because I wanted to give an update on what's happened since Lake Superior. So on the Friday before Terrell and I met up in Cadillac, Michigan, I had a third interview with a company. Felt that the timing of that interview wasn't like an accident. because that interview could have been scheduled during the week that I was in Lake Superior, because there were other candidates competing for this position. But I was one of many, and so the fact that I was the first scheduled for that Friday, I thought was to my advantage, because I could set the tone for the rest of how the rest of the interviews went. So if I came fully prepared, then I could set the bar as high as I wanted to. And so I prepared. I went in and tried to ace it as much as I could. So that was that Friday. We had that interview on that Friday. We went on the trip to Lake Superior. I arrived back this Sunday, after, the second Sunday after the interview. And on that Monday, I was preparing the first Lake Superior Circle Tour video. And if you've seen that intro, the intro talks about transitions. It talks about how a transition starts with an ending, and then there's this really meaningful neutral zone that if you take advantage of it, that's where like real transformation and self-renewal occur. And for many, that neutral zone, which is a neutral zone of uncertainty, fear takes over a lot of people, and so there's quick and decisive action that they take to sort of just remedy whatever situation they're in. They're looking for that quick fix, and those quick fixes can be really important, right? So if you lose your job and you've got all of these bills to pay, like finding a job quickly is necessary. So that's a change. You've lost a job, you started a new job in a short period of time. All of your focus was on just getting that new job. But transitions occur when that neutral zone or that period of uncertainty then turns into an opportunity for real meaningful transformation. And that's where you start to invest in yourself. That's when you start to upskill. That's when you start to, for some, really go into these spaces of solitude. And rather than looking for solutions outwardly, you start going deeper into yourself and understanding how this big ending has impacted your life, and what are the old behaviors and thinking that you want to get rid of to make space for the new to come into your life. And so that's where the neutral zone can be really important. It's about really understanding, how the past is showing up in the present, and how you're essentially rewriting that past for yourself so that you can turn it into an opportunity, or turn it into that transformation or that transmutation. And then when the new thing comes into your life, you're this new person. You've died to your old self. You're still holding on to the things that are really important to you and really meaningful to you, but you've really crossed over into this new space in your life where you're now beginning anew. Like you're really beginning anew, and that's the transition space. You've transformed and you've transmuted into something new and totally different. Before the trip to Lake Superior, I wrote in my journal that I felt that this trip was going to be a marker in the sand, that it felt like a portal that I was entering into, where I was stepping out of the old and would come into the new. And so on that Monday, when I returned back from the Lake Superior trip and I was making the video to the intro of the first video for the Lake Superior Circle Tour, you would have seen that at the end of it, I mentioned that I felt that this trip was going to be much more than just a transition. That it was representative of something brand new. That this was going to be. This was sort of my rite of passage, my leaving behind of the old and finally receiving the new. And so that Monday when I was working on the video, I got a call from the recruiter for the job that I had interviewed for on that Friday. And long story short, she had informed me that I was selected for the position, which was obviously great news to me. This is 9 months after, applying to jobs, over 100 jobs, having, multiple interviews, being told in some of those interviews that, the panel was impressed with me and that they were really excited for me and that they were exactly what I was looking for. But at the end of those processes, obviously receiving rejection news that I wasn't selected. So it was just really, felt really good to finally get the news that I had finally gotten a new job. And it wasn't just a new job, but this is sort of the end of the transition, not the end of the transition, but sort of the start of something new, right? So, because the transition doesn't stop with just getting the new job. The transition continues on with the things that I've learned and what I will apply into the new job that really will determine whether or not I've truly transformed and transmuted, which I believe I have. I believe I've become someone new in this process. But that's not the real, that is part of the update that I wanted to share, but there was something there's something more meaningful that I wanted to share with the viewers and my audience. And that is on the importance of your support network, particularly your family and friends, and the importance of solitude and the role that nature plays in these big life transitions. And I know there's science behind it on why solitude, particularly in nature and particularly in new places, is really important for these big life transitions. But I want to start with the network of family and friends. So before the Lake Superior Circle Tour, out of the blue, Terrell had, I think this was during one of our sort of brainstorming sessions on podcast ideas, Terrell had just put on the table that, he was thinking about during the Lake Superior Circle Tour, and obviously he knew about my situation. He knew that I had lost my job and that I was, it had extended beyond what sort of the period that I thought it would take for me to find a new job. And so in that conversation, Terrell had, proposed the idea of going on this Lake Circle Tour, and he mentioned to me that, hey man, I know you probably don't have the funds to do this, but I'd really love for you to join me. There's not, anybody else that I could think of that I'd want to do this trip with, and so I'd love for you to come and I'll take care of your gas. So don't worry about that. I'll pay for your gas. And I have to admit that gesture, I think, was a real turning point in, for me. I had known our friendship had always been more than just, trucks and overlanding. Because, you have friends that are like your drinking buddies, although I don't drink anymore. I let that go a few years ago. But you have your buddies that you go to the bar with, you have your buddies that you go 4x4ing with, you have your buddies that, you do certain activities with. But that's really what they are. You share some interest with them, and you tap into those dudes, or women, whenever you want to do those certain things, right? But in terms of the deep friendships, in terms of the deep, meaningful friendships, the ones where people like step up and step forward when you're having a hard time, those are few and far between. You know, in your network of, I don't know, some people might say they have 100 friends, you know, one or two of them might be the ones who really show up in really challenging times. And so I was really touched by Terrell's offering to pay for the gas, because, you know, it was about 3,000 miles, 3,500 miles, and, you know, times $3 a gallon, you can do the math. It was around $1,000 that you know, we would end up spending in gas. And so, you know, my immediate response was, you know, man, that's really magnanimous of you. That's really generous of you. And I said, you know, I don't know what my situation is going to be. I've got these applications that are in process, and so I said to him, so why don't we do this, man? I said, I will accept your generosity, and I'm very grateful and thankful for it, and was really touched by it, like I said. But if, you know, during this time I get a job, or while we're on the trip I get news that I have a job, or immediately after we get back I find out news that we get a job, you won't have to cover the gas. And so I took a leap of faith and just said, let's do this, because I felt that the Lake Superior Circle Tour was it was a really important trip for me. It was the chance for me to kind of just change things up and do something new. And so I thought that was also another sort of sort of one of those acts of synchronicity that just came out of the blue, and it was something that, you know, I felt like I had to accept, and I'm grateful that I did, because it obviously led to this good news. And that's really what this podcast, or not this podcast, well, yeah, the podcast and the channel is really all about, right? It's, you know, I made this intentional shift with one of my most recent videos on the renewed vision for the channel, that, you know, I really wanted to focus on, you know, the importance of play in our adult lives through adventure, exploration, and discovery, and how that leads to just more creative living, and just more meaningful and more meaning and connection to the people in our lives, and to nature and to land, right? And that community. You know, the friendship that Terrell and I have forged through our adventures in nature, I think really represents what this channel is about, and how it can really impact, you know, people's lives when you go beyond just those activities, but you actually are, you know, sharing these really important moments and these really significant moments in our lives with each other, and doing it through adventure, exploration, and discovery. And so I think the Lake Superior Circle Tour is real evidence of that, and I'm so grateful for it. And then the other piece of the support network is, you know, my family, and then also my professional network. My family stepped up as I knew they would, and they also went beyond my expectations. You know, I just want to give thanks to my brother. I mean, he would send me, you know, things like dog food, and I'm a big peanut butter guy, so he would send me my favorite extra crunchy peanut butter in the mail, and yeah, he would just lend a helping hand whenever I needed it. My mom did the same. My mom would come over and visit me from time to time, and every time she came by, she had a big bag of groceries and things that I needed for the house, and she would also send me dog food. You know, just those little things that add up. They help you stretch your dollar out a little bit more, so you can focus on, you know, paying your bills, you know, the electricity and car payment, your mortgage, and all that stuff. So it lifts a lot of weight off your shoulders, so that you can live in a space that's a little bit more expansive, where you can also just feel a little bit more safe and confident that you'll get through this. I mean, it's really that morale support that is really the key during these big life transitions. And so, yeah, they were just super important to me. And then also my professional network, right? It's the people who I've met through work that have also become friends, mentors, and coaches to me, that would check in on me sometimes daily, sometimes weekly, and really offer their guidance and support. And where we would also just take hikes together, or just share ideas and approaches for how we were confronting sort of this big life transition together. So I was really grateful for those relationships as well, and those networks, which really helped me through this process. But there's actually one important fact in those three things that I've mentioned, right? The friendships, the family, and the network, and that is you. Because those networks, that support, that professional, personal, and friendship network, it depends on one thing: how you show up. It depends on your contribution. It depends on the hard work that you are doing. It depends on the intentionality that you are bringing into your life. It depends on the value and quality of those relationships in relation to you. So there is no more important work in this life. It's more important than the impact you have at work, than the impact that you have in your community, than the impact that you might have at your church, or whatever it is you do. The most important work that you can do on this planet is the work on yourself. Because the work that you do on yourself shows up in everything else in your life. And so while it's really important that you show gratitude and that you share your successes and your challenges and the way that you overcome obstacles, although it's really important to share that and acknowledge and recognize that you couldn't overcome those things without the help of others, because we do live in a highly interdependent, interconnected world. The most important key element for overcoming and achieving success in this life, as I mentioned, is the work that you do on yourself. So don't ever forget that, and that's something that I've really reinforced throughout this transition, and I just thought it was really important to share. Which also brings me to another key point that I wanted to talk about, and that is that pivot in my YouTube channel. So prior to this transition happening, I had approached YouTube more for my own sort of personal enjoyment. In terms of the videos that I was making, I wanted to just, my approach was just to create these videos that where I could document my adventures, where I could document mountain biking, where I could document, overlanding and jungle 4x4ing and my expeditions and sort of the travels around the world. I have videos on like a safari in Eswatini. I have videos on a trip I did to Namibia. I have videos on, jungle driving in Guatemala. I have videos on cleaning my mountain bike. And so these were all things that, I just enjoyed doing and I was documenting. But there wasn't a real sort of cohesive, sort of like singular mission or message in all of those videos, right? They were just kind of done spontaneously. And, this process, this transition, gave me the opportunity to really start looking at my own life and trying to align everything that I was doing in my life to a sort of single mission, a single values-based sort of paradigm for my life. And as I started leaning in more to YouTube, I started to refine those values that I live my life by. And before I get into that, I just want to share too, and I'm not a New Year's resolution guy, but I goal set, and then I set the systems and structures in place that help me, achieve those goals in my life. And those goals are, like quarterly, annually, and sometimes decade-long goals, which I have written in my journal. But I also have a vision board in my house, and in 2024, right before the new year, I had written on my vision board that I felt that 2025 was going to be a year of abundance and a year of transformation. And kind of eerily, I drew this mountain on my vision board that showed it was a rock mountain, like a full rock exposure. And I drew myself sort of climbing up this mountain, and at one point there's this cliff where I'm struggling to get up, and once I get up it, I find myself sitting on the ledge and just looking out into the open, kind of feeling lost. And then I get myself back up, and then I climb to the top, and when I'm at the top, I think it says no fear, no pain, no ego, only love, something like that. The vision board's right outside my door, and I'll just throw it up here on the screen so you can see it. And then on that vision board as well, I listed out first I had 4 areas of health that I wanted to focus on. So physical, mental, spiritual, and financial. So those were the 4 health areas that I wanted to focus on. And then somehow back in like May, when I started this pivot or right before I started the pivot to my YouTube channel, I wrote a 5th one, and that was digital health. I don't know where that came from, it just came out of nowhere. Also on the board, it talks about, this transmutation, and I list out all of my daily goals. So it's, exercise daily, it's eat well, be a creator, a bunch of other items. Again, you'll see that on the screen. Then I also listed out a vision for my life. So what are sort of the values-based qualities that I want to live my life by? And so when I made this pivot with my channel, it actually gave me a real opportunity to align the vision board with my website, with my channel, and also with something that I had shared with a colleague of mine where she had asked me, or I think I had offered it up, if money wasn't an obstacle for me, what would I do with my life? How would I turn my passion into my purpose and my purpose into my mission? And my answer was, I would want to buy large swaths of land, rewild them, and then give it back to the people, give it back to nature, and use that space to reconnect people with sort of a sense of purpose and a sense of connection that I think not only that we've lost in many parts of the world, but that we're continuing to lose. And I'm also someone I love reading. I love books by Robin Wall Bell. I forget her name. She wrote Broady Sweetgrass, Robin Wall Kimmerer. In Broady Sweetgrass, it talks a lot about reciprocity. It talks a lot about mutuality. It talks about a lot of, when you know the land, the land always knows you. Nature is healing, and just being grateful for the land that is the world that is actually giving us life, right? These are all not new. Like indigenous and traditional societies have, for generations, going back to the Egyptians and Incas and Maya, for generations have understood that the very world that we live in is the very world that sustains us, and our relationship with it really determines our survival on this earth, right? And you look at Native American culture, you look at indigenous culture around the world, and the one thing that you see show up repeatedly is this reverence for nature. So all of that stuff is just really important to me, and during my transition process, there were really key moments in my transition where I found myself going back into nature and into those spaces of solitude to regroup after I've hit a wall. And I always found that I was able to come back new. For example, there was, a few moments during the transition where, I would go snowboarding with a friend, or we would go hiking, and I came back with fresh thinking. There were 2 trips to Mauer Basin in West Virginia that I can say were real meaningful markers for me. One of them was this week-long trip that I did by myself. I just took my journal and my book. I finished the book Big Magic, and I just journaled every single day that I was out there. And then the second trip was when Terrell came down for my birthday, and then also this trip to Lake Superior. So those were really meaningful markers in the sand for me, in terms of how nature was able to sort of give me that new energy and give me that new perspective that I needed to transition into this new space. I also want to share the 5 values that I sat down and came up with during the transition process that I think are going to stay with me for the rest of my life. I think they are values that really resonate with the way I live my life, and I know that by making them public on my website, it's a space that I can frequently come back to and remind myself if I'm ever feeling lost or need that sort of extra pickup. So I'll throw that up on the screen and leave a link in the description on where you can find that. Another piece that I forgot to mention is with the pivot of the YouTube channel, I'd created this strategy where I really clearly defined my mission, my purpose, my key performance indicators, the milestones, the objectives, the types of content that I wanted to create for the channel. It also listed out just a schedule of content and ideas. Also started taking notes on how to create a good hook, and just sort of the nine shots you want to take whenever you're making a video. So I was becoming really more intentional with how I was approaching the channel, and I hope that's come through in some of the changes that you've seen with the videos I've been making. Still a lot for me to learn, but I've actually really enjoyed this YouTube process, taking it more seriously. I have, as I've mentioned in some of my videos, have a much deeper appreciation for content creation and personal branding, and it's something that I think is going to be really helpful to me as I step into this new role in my new job. And just because I've gotten a new job doesn't mean I'm going to stop making these videos and sort of steer away from the YouTube channel. In fact, I think I'm excited about sort of the new videos that are coming out, because I'm going to be doing some research and sharing that research through my videos on things like how nature helps us how nature helps us get into flow, how nature fuels creativity in our life. And so I'm really looking forward to doing more of that research and sharing that with viewers, and while still continuing to make content on overlanding trips, on the patrol, mountain biking, and things like that. So even though I've started this new job, I'm going to still be making some content, and yeah, I just really, really thankful for all of you. I mean, you all are what make this channel exciting and enjoyable to make, and I'm looking forward to collaborating, co-creating with all of my viewers. And so make sure you hit a like, comment, and subscribe, and yeah, thanks for tuning in. I'm really grateful that you guys are a part of the journey. So until next time, see you guys later.